foul or no?
No call.
No calls.
Play on.
No.
Foul.
No.
Kevin Blackistone, I've waited 95 and a half hours for you. This is under your instruction. Please, the floor is yours. I don't know what to do now. Talk to me.
Tony, what I meant was to call me on my cell phone or text me at home. I didn't mean talk to me on international television about what happened. Look, let me explain what happened. You just showed the critical play. That should have been an and one for a superstar in this league with James Harden flying into the stands that aren't even there after being love-tapped by Kawhi Leonard. Also, I didn't anticipate that a team that shoots 84% from the free throw line, which the Clippers do, all of a sudden would shoot 72% from the free throw line. I also didn't realize that they would give up 60 points in the paint to a team that we think of as a jump shooting team in the net. So a lot of things went wrong.
Right, you didn't realize the Clippers sometimes don't close out games. I can understand why you didn't realize that. George Sedano, what happened yesterday?
Well, the Brooklyn Nets are becoming a real team, Tony, and it's happening right before our eyes. What we're seeing is in the first 13 games that James Harden played for the Nets, they allowed 123 points per game. And now in the last six, that they've won those last six in this winning streak, they're allowing 111 points per game. That's a difference of 12 points. They are a better defensive team than we give them credit for, and it takes time. Like, offensively, we knew they were going to be good. They're 6-1 against the top three seeds in both conferences, mostly because they were good on offense. But now we're starting to see on this West Coast trip that they can play defense. As long as they play defense at an average level, they're probably going to win the championship if Anthony Davis doesn't come back.
Whoa, hold on a second. That was strong words from George Sedano. Now we got to jump on that. Please, Emily Kaplan, floor is yours.
No, I want to talk about what I want to talk about. Look, I think the Nets are on a different level right now than the Clippers. They've only had 7 games this year where their big three has played, and yet they are 12-2 against the top 14 teams in the league. The Clippers, meanwhile, show they look fantastic when they've got everyone together, but if they're missing one superstar like Paul George at the end of that game, they're still not quite there yet. As for the last play, a couple years ago, Mark Cuban commissioned a study on flopping, and the researchers' key finding was one of the most telling signs for a flop is an excessive upwards arm movement. Watch James Harden on that play. He literally looks like he opened up the trash and saw 4-week-old spoiled milk. It was a flop.
Excessive arm movement. All right, and now Pablo Torre.
Yeah, I want to excessively move my arms because George Sedano just threw a giant hunk of red meat at me that basically forces me to respond and overlook everything that Emily said, which was very accurate and great analysis because, George, this has the feel of GameStop to me at this point. I know the Nets are good. The Nets are really good. The Nets, to me, are the second best team in the East. But because they've won 6 straight games at an unsustainable defensive pace after being a bottom 5-6 team in the league for the entire year, suddenly they're going to beat the Sixers, the Lakers, whoever else we want to throw at them, the Jazz even. No, to me, Tony, this is a team in the Nets that is on a very good run. But it is not sustainable. And for everybody out there, like our friend Mina Kimes, who was saying to themselves, oh man, what a great stock to own. No, you want to sell right now before this thing actually crashes.
George Sedano, back to you.
Well, I'll start with Pablo and then work my way to Emily because I thought Emily made a great point, unlike Pablo, because what I will say to you is this, is if you talk to people around the league, defense is actually harder to come across as far as continuity is concerned than offense is in the NBA. A lot of guys can put the ball on the floor and get it into the basket, but on defense, you have to play 5 guys on a string. So when you talk to people around the league, that was always the biggest concern, and you're starting to see semblances of that. Not to mention that we know how good they are on offense. They have 6 guys who are shooting over 40% from three-point land.
So you're not going to take it back? I mean, you're calling this in February.
No.
That this is the NBA champion here if Anthony Davis doesn't come back full strength.
Well, I told you they would win the East just, when Harden arrived. And I'm telling you, if Anthony Davis, who is the cheat code, by the way, in the league, because when they go small with Anthony Davis, I don't think anybody can beat them. Yes, I think the Nets will win the championship. And to Emily's point, the team's already complaining about calls. You saw Paul George yesterday say they control the refs. That sounds like to me teams are already trying to line things up to work against
Paul George
the Nets
has something else that's being controlled, and it's his minutes. 2 minutes and 50 seconds right now going to be a benefit for them down the stretch of the season? You got to win games when they're right there for you. They win this game if Paul George
I'm
stays
with
on the
you.
floor.
It's only the best
I'm with you.
player
You
on the
got to
court
keep them on the floor. You can figure out those minutes later.
We move on. The NHL outdoors at Tahoe. It was beautiful. It was also an 8-hour delay Saturday. And it was beautiful. It was also a 4-hour delay on Sunday. I mean, the shots were very, very sweet. The sunsets were incredible. Emily, was this the Macho Man Savage glasses? Oh, yeah. Was this a win for the NHL?
I can see why you would view this as a fail because the NHL misjudged something that's existed for 4.63 billion years and missed out on 2 prime broadcast windows. But overall, I'm always talking about the NHL showing more personality, and this weekend was oozing from it. You saw from those shots. David Pastrnak also after the game was complaining to the media that we were interrupting his post-game Barbie Girl dance party in the locker room. So Gary Bettman says that he is going to go back to stadiums next year because we need the fans and we need the revenue. I just hope that we carry the spirit of this thing going forward because it's exactly what the NHL needs.
KB?
Look, it was an outdoor event. This is what happened. You cannot control the weather. They expected there to be cloud cover for the sun, and guess what? The clouds didn't show up for the game. So, of course, they had an issue there. We just watched NASCAR on its opening weekend in Daytona not get restarted until 9 o'clock at night. Why? Because there was a weather situation. So anytime you have sports out of doors, you're going to run into this. And of all the outdoor games that they've had, this was finally the one or two that ran into that problem.
Okay.
I have no problem.
In the end, pass or fail?
Pass for me.
Okay, Pablo
It's
Torre, how about you?
Yeah, I'm tempted to say fail because this felt like a metaphor for our planet in general, right? Like everything's out of control meteorologically, the earth is melting, all of that felt resonant when I was watching an 8-hour delay. But to me, Tony, and maybe this is just because I am somebody who unabashedly loves and fetishizes sunsets on Instagram, it was amazing to watch. It was beautiful. The aesthetics, the fact that we had unabating sun as a reason for anything in sports, even if one goalie had sunlight in his eyes in a way that felt like a competitive disadvantage, all of that was whimsical and interesting and different, and I want more of it, even if it's
Whimsical,
a
you
little
say.
melty.
Whimsical. And George Sedano, how about you?
Tony, I'm going to give the NHL an A for ingenuity and creativity, but an F on execution. Far be it from me to disagree with my Girl Scout cookie dealer in Kevin Blackistone over there, but I'll tell you this, they knew that the sun was going to be a problem.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
They knew the sun was going to be a problem, Tony, because the Bruins and that group and the Flyers were out there trying to skate earlier in practice, and they had to move them indoors on Saturday. So that should have been a tell-all sign that they weren't going to be able to make this thing work. So I would give them an F there. And then what puts me over the top on pass or fail is Nathan McKinnon. They tried to do this thing where he was golfing. It looked like something I could have shot better on my iPhone. So, fail.
That's an NBC issue.
Yeah. The NHL slept on the sun, all right? They're nocturnal. We know this. We'll move on. Now Cam Newton's exchange is this weekend at the 7-on-7 tournament with a player on the team his foundation sponsors. This first video, it's full on from the player, calling out Newton's career, as you can see. The second one, Newton goes back and talks it out with the player, says, if you want some attention, I'm going to give you some attention the right way, bro. Today, a public post from the player and a full apology, saying he let his competitive side get the best of him. It's a huge miscommunication. His parents never taught him to be disrespectful, and he apologized and said he hopes he can be forgiven. He's a high school student. Pablo, how does it all sit with you?
It felt like someone, a young person who had been raised by Twitter. It felt like a real-life Twitter interaction being performed between a pro athlete and a young kid who, even if he is that young, should know better. And I'm not going to say this is a moral panic of some kind, maybe because I'm so numb to this kind of interaction happening all of the time on the internet. But in person, it does throw it into sharper relief where I'm like, the young kid should not be saying that. But I'm mostly impressed by Cam Newton getting, like, very carefully not trolled into doing something worse. Doing all of that on camera and managing that power imbalance and not seeming like a bully is so hard to do when you're being baited into it by a troll, and Cam handled it as well as I think anyone could reasonably hope to.
How did it sit with you, Kevin Blackstone?
Well, maybe it is the generation of social media, but I'm just thinking back to when I was a kid and the first time I ever got a chance to meet an athlete who I looked up to, and I was just fearful of even talking to the person. I wanted to get in the back of the line. I didn't even want to be seen. And so for kids nowadays, or at least this particular kid, to have the chutzpah to do what he did just boggles my mind. If you're a young football player, you see Cam Newton maybe not as your idol. He may not be your favorite player, but certainly someone who has been incredibly successful at something that you think you would like to do. So I don't understand how you could approach him as you did. But good for Cam Newton to come back and try and have a conversation with the kid, even though it was once again on camera and in the social media world.
Emily Kaplan?
Yeah, I love the use of the word chutzpah. But look, this is a kid at Cam Newton's camp wearing Cam Newton's gear, smack talking Cam Newton. To me, this is the perfect encapsulation of where we're at as a society, where we commodify athletes and celebrity. The Britney doc was a great example of this. This is a great example of it. Hopefully we can use both as teaching moments.
And George Sedano.
Tony, it's an absolute microcosm, as everyone has alluded to, of what we deal with now with social media and it just coming to life, basically. But I don't want to judge anyone, let alone this kid, by his worst moment, potentially. And hopefully this is his worst moment. He's someone that has since apologized, right? That has gone out there and talked about how he wants to succeed at football and at life. And look, I am with Pablo on this. Like, Cam Newton handled this as well as he could. Initially, like anyone, he would have been at least a little defensive, but then caught himself and was like, hey, where's your dad? Like, where are your parents? And I think that if I'm the parent of that kid and I have two little ones, right, like, I'd be mortified right now. So I understand, like, all of these angles, and I think it could have been way worse, and I'm glad it wasn't.
I'm glad you said that about the young man, though, and the apology he posted today. We have talked about professional athletes or executives with teams. We're about to talk about another one and apologizing. It's one of the hardest things to do. So I was glad that he had that opportunity to do that today and put that out publicly. Last thing, and Pablo, you alluded to this. Cam Newton's been doing this for a decade plus, reaching out to young people like this. I'm going to end with his own words. People want to see me arguing with another young man and to see me get in my feelings. But the truth is, I impact kids' lives in a positive way. Make no mistake, I allow kids to realize there's an out by using their football talents to get them to the next level, and in most cases, out of the hood. Cam Newton, thank you very much for that. Fire President and CEO Kevin Mather talked about offensively, as detailed by Seattle Times' Ryan Divish. On that long, long list, you see Japanese players, Latin players. Mather made multiple remarks about the English language as it relates to both. Talked about his disgust with having to pay Hisashi Iwakuma's translator half a decade ago. That came up. His thoughts, competence, and personalities of future Mariners stars Jared Kelenic and Julio Rodriguez came up. About service time and finances. This was all during a Rotary Club breakfast that he was speaking at. 45 minutes. He released an apology last night, said he's been on the phone apologizing, and that he is committed to making amends. As of our tape time, no public comment from the Seattle Mariners. Pablo, what do we have here?
We have a fireable offense, Tony. This is the president and CEO of a team who has an ignorant position, an incompetent position wrapped in a very obvious bigotry and prejudice. He is diminishing and resenting players, his employees, because why? They come from other places and have to learn languages and need support and resources to do that. At the same time, he is diminishing how hard it is and how good they are at overcoming that obstacle. To me, I wonder why he doesn't like his own employees in that way and why he's so comfortable saying stuff like this to strangers.
Kevin Blackstone?
You know, there was a documentary that came out 10 years ago called Baseball Pelotero, and it was all about the baseball industry in the Dominican and how Major League Baseball teams approach them, and it showed this very paternalistic disdain for those players. And you hear it in his comments here, where he's talking about basically warehousing young Dominican players in a hotel until you get the talent out of them. And this is the same kind of plantation mentality that baseball has been trying to distance itself from, and this guy is still holding true to it.
Emily Kaplan?
This is someone who shouldn't be in a leadership position to begin with. The Seattle Times reported that before he was even president and CEO, he was accused of workplace misconduct against women, and that was resolved in a financial settlement. Now, if you take these comments in a vacuum, it shows he just doesn't get it. Do you think he spent a second to wonder why players take a while to learn English, or why they might not be comfortable speaking it in a language they don't know to media? a little empathy goes a long way in not sounding like a bonehead.
Well, Mather would be a demonstration of how difficult it is to speak English at this point. And again, you said this could happen in a vacuum. It's not in a vacuum. In fact, it was just at a brunch, a breakfast Zoom, that all this comes out. You wonder what's happening behind the scenes. So I ask you, George Sedano, what position is baseball in right now? Major League Baseball, having one of the presidents of a team saying this publicly.
In a precarious one, Tony. This is a team that touts itself with its diversity on the field, but yet you see some intolerance, certainly behind the scenes, right? I think that's a big problem for them. And as Emily alluded to, there's a history of, issues behind the scenes with this particular gentleman who is the CEO of the Mariners. And as far as Julio Rodriguez is concerned, this is someone that, look, came to this country as a teenager and has insisted from day one to do all his interviews in English because he wants to assimilate to playing in this country and playing in the United States and making things easier while also learning. And let's not forget, he also took a stray at Kyle Seager for being quote-unquote overpaid. So he covered the entire gamut of just insulting everyone regardless of their background.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. We'll move on. Buy or sell two. The weekend for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards started a culture war with that dunk on Friday. We'll get to that a little bit later. The team firing and hiring a head coach within minutes of losing to the Knicks last night. Ryan Saunders fired. Chris Finch, an assistant with the Raptors when he woke up Sunday morning, hired by Minnesota, given a long-term deal Sunday night. What is that, George?
Strange, Tony. It doesn't happen very often where someone from another staff as an assistant gets hired as the head coach to a new team, right? They have a guy in David Vanderpool who's out there who coached for the Warriors, who now is on this Minnesota staff. Damian Lillard tweeted about him. I feel like the NBA needs to look at this and say, maybe we need a Rooney rule in this situation where teams can interview guys like they did with J.B. Bickerstaff in Cleveland. He was the intern for a short amount of time. They decided.
Was there even an interview process here? I mean, it just seems like the Timberwolves.
No, it didn't seem like
exactly. Emily Kaplan, what is this?
Yeah, remember when Steve Nash was hired and the backlash from players and coaches of a white man cutting in front of the line for one of the premier jobs? No disrespect to Finch, who has ample experience, but did they even consider Vanderpool? I'm glad that these stars raised the issue.
Kevin Blackistone, what do we have here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's another instance where the NBA, is always held up as a paragon of progressivism, has some sort of issue pop up like this where Vanderpool, from right here in Montgomery County, Maryland, Montgomery Blair High School, gets overlooked by this guy outside of the organization and can't even tell if he got an interview. So it seems very
Pablo,
unfair.
is this an instance of a franchise wanting somebody and getting them, or should there have been a hiring process?
I think there should have been a larger process, but let's be clear about what this is. This is a GM in Gerson Rosas saying, I know this guy, he's my friend, let's go after Finch now, that's our guy. And to do that is to go out on a limb, because players in the NBA rightfully have critiques when hires are made of people who don't look like them in numbers that make sense to them and to many of us. So he's ready for the scrutiny, is the point.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. Not a lot of scoring in that segment. Not a lot of time for us right now to say goodbye to George and Kevin. Emily Kaplan, Pablo Torre. Showdown in 2 minutes. The year, which then somehow turned into a conversation about whether you could have the dunk of a year at a game where you were at the moment 3 of 14 and 0 of 7 from 3 and losing. The dunk of the year by Anthony Edwards. Emily Kaplan, tell me everything that was going through your mind when you saw it.
This is total disrespect. It totally defies gravity. He risked breaking his back on the way down. But yeah, it reminded me that this guy was actually good because he was 3 of 14 shooting, 0 for deep, and his team kind of stinks.
Pablo Torre.
I was thinking mostly no. Is that Yuta? No. Please, no, Yuta, no. No, my sweet, sweet Yuta. Why? Why?
See, I feel Yuta Watanabe was the one who was detonated. I feel that it's okay. He was showing effort, and that's a good thing, Pablo Torre. But come on, it's a joyful moment when this happens. Don't let the stat boys of the world ruin it for you. FaceTime Emily Kaplan.
I wanted to alert you guys all to an absolutely wild story going on in the NHL right now. Rangers winger Artemi Panarin has been a vocal critic of the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, and apparently it has consequences because one of his former coaches in Russia has accused him of getting into a fight with an 18-year-old girl in Latvia in 2011. Artemi is so disturbed by it. He's worried about his family. He's taking a leave of absence from the team. We will see where it goes, but it is a reminder that it is a privilege to be able to speak your mind in this country.
Thank you for that, Emily. It's a wild story, right? I mean, that accusation is very, very serious. And then on the other side of it, the repercussions of speaking your